Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. I'm Pam Laricchia, longtime unschooling mom and author. Join me and my wonderful guests for interviews, information, and inspiration about unschooling and living joyfully with your family. You can find the episode show notes, your free introductory ebook, What is Unschooling, and lots more information at livingjoyfully.ca. And here's the show. Hi everyone, I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 79 of the podcast. It's the 5th of July, 2017, as I record this intro. And this week, I'm speaking with Dan Cadzow. Dan's an archaeologist who chose to leave his PhD program and become a stay-at-home unschooling dad of 4 kids. We talk about his path to unschooling, including how he's developed trust in the process, what the most challenging aspect has been so far for him, and his advice for dads who are just starting out on this journey. I really enjoyed the archaeological perspective that Dan brought to our conversation. It's really interesting stuff, and I hope you enjoy it as well. I mentioned last week that Lissy and her boyfriend Jacob were visiting, and we had such a fun time. They had lots of time to just hang out and be walking in the forest, climbing trees, playing on the trampoline, soaking in the hot tub, making s'mores around the fire pit, and just sitting on the patio reading and chatting. Oh, and the impromptu photo shoots, like the 45 minutes they spent on the roof as the sun set on their last night here. They're both photographers. Joseph and Michael were around for a good chunk of the week as well, so there was lots of fun and chatter. We also visited the Science Center and had a swim and barbecue at my mom's. One night we had a big birthday dinner for Michael, who turned 20 last week, and he took the next day off so that he, Lissy, and Jacob, who are all roller coaster aficionados, could spend the day at Canada's Wonderland. Another night, we went to see Michael in the show at Medieval Times, and that's always super fun. Lissy hadn't seen him as a knight, and Jacob had never been to Medieval Times, so that was great. And we went into town to see the local fireworks show for Canada Day. So it was a great week. We all had a lovely time enjoying the things that we love to do, both out and about and hanging out at home. So it was kind of the perfect mix for us. And we're all excited to get back to our work too, which I think is great. Speaking of, I want to say thank you to everyone who has chosen to support the show on Patreon. And a big extra welcome to new patron Anita Wright. With Anita's pledge, we hit our next goal. Yay! Moving forward, I won't be needing to pay out of pocket for the data hosting and transcription costs for producing the podcast. Thank you so much. And to celebrate, I'll be creating a private community for patrons where we can connect and chat. And if you're a patron, keep an eye out for that. I'll be in touch soon. And if you'd like to join us, you can support the show, even for as little as $1 a month, at the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And this week's quote is from our guest, Dan Cadzow. Our schooling system's only about 150 years old. There are examples of schools and workshops and apprenticeships back into antiquity, but for the most part, kids learned organically just by being in society. I think of it in terms of the transmission of culture. And 150 years ago, somebody decided, this is really important, we need to control it. And you can hypothesize over their motivations, whether they were good or bad, but I think that it's really hurting us as a society that we are trying to control it and limiting people's experiences so much. But it seems like every generation seems to get a little worse and a little worse. And now you drive around the country and those iconic farmhouses are crumbling in ruins and there's trailers next to them and 6 kids lined up getting into the school bus. And it just kind of breaks my heart to see what we're losing with this overreaching attempt to control the transmission of culture. It's like the kids are separated from the world and taught about it through abstractions. No, I love that point. Well, and first, isn't it amazing to remember that the school system as we know it, which feels so deeply woven into the fabric of our lives, is only 150 years old? It is a cultural experiment, not a definitive answer. And the second thing that jumped out at me is how, when this idea comes up in conversation, instead of considering it as information about how human beings innately learn, so often the accusations fly about us wanting to take everybody back to the world as it was before the school system came along, that we're pining for the good old days. And that entirely misses the point. It's about how children, how human beings learn in any time period by being immersed in their society, in their culture, not by being separated from it. It's about helping children learn the way they are wired to do it best. And that's what unschooling is all about, living and learning in today's world. It just makes so much sense, doesn't it? And now on to the interview with Dan. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Dan Cadzow. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Hello. Dan is a stay-at-home unschooling dad of 4, and it's been a really interesting journey for him, and I am looking forward to hearing a lot more about it. So to get us started, Dan, can you share with us a bit about you and your family and how you came to unschooling?
Sure. My wife and I are anthropologists. I'm an archaeologist by training, and we were in graduate school. Well, I was working as a field archaeologist, and my wife went to graduate school, and we had our first kid, and then she graduated, and I went into graduate school. I got a IGERT fellowship, so it was like 4 years of a free ride, and then we had 3 more kids, in the ensuing time. And during like the class intensive phase, the oldest was getting school ready. And, and we were using daycare a lot too while I was in school and she was working. And, and it just was so hard. It was so stressful leaving the crying kids in the care of the daycare workers and later teachers. And we didn't feel good about that at all. It just seemed like it wasn't healthy. And, like the society prepares you for that. They tell you, oh, they're going to cry. And the daycare workers would use euphemisms like, oh, he was a little sad, but he cheered up. And, I saw that. It wasn't just sadness, it was holy terror. Who are you leaving me with, but you have these strong pressures from society. It's like everybody does this, do this too. And, we did. And over time, there were just more and more of those things that, we found that everybody does that we didn't want to do. Like there was no need to have our kids sleep in a quiet, dark room away from us at an early age. Like that's just not how, as an archaeologist, how society has worked for the last 100 or so thousand years. Most of the time extended families were living in, one-room buildings or caves or huts or lean-tos or out in the open, but all together. So, we began to question that sort of thing more and more. And as my class-intensive part of graduate school was sort of easing up, we had Asa, the oldest, in school. And, we were noticing it was taking a toll on him. His grammar was getting worse. There were incidents of violence and, reported by his teachers. And he picked up some sort of like sexist and racist dialogue, which I was friends with his teachers. I know it wasn't coming from them. It was coming from the other students, and with a classroom of like one teacher and 20, 30 students, that the kids are learning more from each other. So when it came time to put the second kid in, we decided instead to pull the first kid out and then take the others out of daycare. And, I was just going to do it at home. And we didn't really know much about homeschooling and hadn't even heard of unschooling back then. But it became, instantly apparent that the whole school model just doesn't work. There's no way to get kids to sit down and do worksheets and study discrete topics at discrete times just because you tell them to. It's like you would have to be very authoritarian and coercive to even try to pull that off, So we started slipping into the unwittingly slipping into the unschooling paradigm, right away. And, over time, for me, it started out a lot just reading like science magazine, science news, and seeing all these studies about kids and cognitive development and what works and what helps with learning and what doesn't. And it became increasingly apparent that what goes on in schools is really, if anything, harmful to kids and not helpful. Like the lack of play, the lack of recess, the lack of, creative free time where kids can learn how to collaborate and compromise in small groups. That's all missing except for those, diminishing periods of recess that are still there. And so we started thinking about what we really wanted to do, with our kids, what our hopes were, and what, exploring what the kids wanted, like what they naturally had, predilections for. And a lot of it was just that unstructured free time exploring. I'd say exploring is probably the biggest part. Just wandering around, looking under rocks, behind trees, climbing things, and doing that in novel environments. And that sort of became our mantra. So like on our school paperwork, we write it as, the world is our classroom and our textbooks, and we, take the kids and we keep them in this complex and interesting world, and they ask questions and we answer them, even if we have to do research to do so, which is often the case. And we answer them in ways that cover the topics listed in the above stated state-mandated curriculum. And, so far it's been working out great. We're really enjoying our kids and how they're turning out and how much they love each other and are comfortable around each other. Of course, they fight from time to time. Who doesn't? Even mom and dad does. But for the most part, they just get along famously, and they're learning how to deal with conflicts, and that's actually one of the biggest perks I see, in our family. And I don't spend a lot of time comparing our family to other families because that's just not healthy. But to society at large, I see like our kids don't have that ageism or competitiveness. We get a lot of that's not fair, but sometimes like things could be a little more fair. You got to try to figure out ways to do that. But like the big kids and the little kids, they play together. It's not just the older kids and the smaller kids pairing off. Sometimes the biggest and the littlest will pair off, and the two middle kids will pair off, or any other permutation, or a lot of times they're just all together. Just this morning they were up in Asa's bedroom, and just hanging out, talking, making up songs with silly words in them, and singing together. And I don't know, it's like a little piece of Little House on the Prairie or something, like that you feel like you're creating. So
no, I love that. That was a huge piece. There wasn't that grade age separation, you know what I mean? We're all just people, right? And we're all just hanging out and doing things together, and who pairs up with who is just based on the interest and what somebody is interested in doing at that moment. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
That's such a huge difference, isn't it? I loved your point about climbing trees, because my daughter Lissy's visiting, and just yesterday they were climbing the trees here still, but it's Michael's birthday today, so he's 20 and she's 23. Happy birthday, Michael!
Wow! And
they were out climbing trees still, together.
That's great. I always tell the kids, if you don't give up on that, you'll never lose it. You can keep it for the rest of your life. That's Leela barking at nothing, apparently. Sorry.
Hi, Leela. The other interesting point that I really like, it is really interesting, isn't it, that so much of the research, you were talking about reading, you're reading in journals and what they're finding about, learning and relationships and all that kind of stuff. How it works best is not the way the school system is set up, right? but still the system is just so hard to change, even though all the research is pointing in another direction. I think, we're finding there more and more alternative learning environments being set up now, because you can't just kind of change and tweak the system that we've got, because it's just unmanageable.
It would require
so large.
such a fundamental restructuring that.
Yeah, that
there's too many people in a bureaucratic sense just advocating for their own positions, and like their positions would go away or be completely remade, and they don't want to do that. And there's a lot of money wrapped up in it too, that
exactly
compromises people's motivations.
That's a nice way to put it. Question 2, you mentioned your kids and some of their interests. I was wondering if you could share what they're enjoying at the moment and how they're pursuing that. I'd love to hear what the kids are up to.
Well, our biggest family project is we fixed up an apartment above our garage and run an Airbnb out of it, which is kind of neat because we get people from all over the world visiting, and they're mostly really friendly and interactive, but and every now and then they'll even have kids that we can play with. But we're taking that money, and in lieu of our savings for retirement, because I already feel like I've retired, and we're buying a very old farm in Livingston County, New York. And so we're in the process of closing on that, but we have an occupancy agreement. So it's this great old farm with all kinds of very old buildings and creeks, and part of it's forested, part of it's brush, part of it's agricultural, and we're going to try to we're sort of thinking of it as an unofficial immersion learning center with a focus on immersion self-directed learning center with a focus on horticulture, subsistence, and just nature ecology. And so they love it when they can get out there and play in the creeks and climb trees and just run around. We live in the geographic center of Buffalo, New York, and there's an expressway that was supposed to be removed when we bought our house. So, our movement here in the city are really restricted. And, out there, they can just explore and roam. It's 40 acres of beauty. And so they're really getting into that. They've been starting all kinds of plants in little peat pots. And unfortunately, the closing has been delayed by 2 months because of requirements for planning board meetings and then public hearings. So we have all these kale and broccoli and, cilantro and parsley and stuff growing on our front porch, and they're getting dwarfed by their small containers. But they're very much excited about gardening and growing things and improving the soil. We're gonna the kids they love digging, so they each have their own shovels, and they want to dig a giant pit and just start collecting all the firewood we can and have a big fire and then bury it, so we can basically make biochar and then till that into the gardens along with some compost that we're already saving up. And so that's sort of the big thing that's kind of we're all focusing on, and acquiring the tools that you need for country living, like a trailer to get the mower down there and pick up lumber and stuff like that. But in terms of day-to-day stuff, the 3 oldest are all boys. The youngest is a girl, Iris, who's 4 now. Oh no, 5. And the boys are incredibly immersed in Minecraft. I know that comes up on every show, and I honestly don't know what is so educational about Minecraft, but I do know that it enthralls them. And when they get their turn or time on a screen, that's what they love, building and exploring and mining, and so that's sort of I can't figure out what is so educational about it. I've watched videos about why it's educational, and it didn't really resonate with me, but the fact that they love it, I assume they're getting something out of it. The same was true years ago. They developed an obsession, the older 2, with dot to dots. And I was constantly printing dot to dot worksheets out from the computer, and I was constantly fighting this urge to say, "Come on, you've played this out. You get it. There's no more. Can we move on? But I didn't. I fought that, and in the end, we ended up buying these extreme dot to dot books that had like in the thousands of dots, and every now and then I'd slip and I'd say, "Come on, you did that. Why don't you color it in and cut it out and we'll hang it up or something?" And they're like, "Nope, I just want to connect the dots." And it's like, well, I don't know what you're getting out of it, but it's holding your interest, so you're getting something out of it. So we just supported it, and then they move on to other things, but they vary. Their interests change a lot. One day they want to make potions and then freeze them and then thaw them with a magnifying glass or start fires with a magnifying glass. And the next day they want to do color and cut crafts, play in the dirt, climb trees. It really varies quite a bit. It's hard to pin one specific interest on one specific kid.
Yeah. But it's so fun to watch where their mind goes, isn't it? Right? To see just all the different things that they come up with every day when they wake up.
Yeah. It's fun too, like seeing them apply like vernacular. Like when it comes to television, we regulate it a little bit. Like our underlying thinking. I know it's not a pure unschooling thing, but our underlying thinking, initially was screen time is really only as bad as the quality of what they're watching, plus what it's displacing. So, like if it's a beautiful day and there's a park nearby, but they're just watching TV all day, that seems kind of bad. But if you're on a long interstate highway trip just staring at cornfields, it's like, I think a screen would be much more educational than that. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Just like they learn, all kinds of like cultural stuff from the TV that they wouldn't learn in our house because, we are who we are. We have our sort of subset of American culture, but there's so much more out there that they learn from, and just hearing the littlest, especially, like I can't come up with one right now, but apply these kind of like complicated colloquial terms to novel situations is always kind of fun.
Yeah. They bring such an interesting and open perspective on things, right? So I've always been fascinated and loved the connections that they make, because they aren't the connections so often that I would make, but they see these fresh and new ways of putting things together. That's always really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of the problems with our educational system, K through PhD, is that so much of it is structured by pleasing the teachers and the people who set up the curriculum's expectations that you're never going to come up with novelty. If the first order of business is to make sure that you've regurgitated what they think is important. And I even think of like how medical doctors are trained with their residencies where they have to like work 20 hours straight, and it's like that in a military or a monastery setting, it'd be pretty clear that that's like brainwashing, like driving the stuff into their heads. But we just sort of take it for granted, and it's like, I don't want my kid to be the one who's, being operated on by somebody who's been, on their feet for 18 hours. It's like, it just doesn't seem healthy, but it's also, like going back to the novelty thing, you're just, repeating what's expected of you and not allowed to think for yourself. And even when you're, like in academia, the rule is publish or perish. You might get into a small teaching college that has the emphasis on teaching, but when you're submitting articles to these journals, it's like, heaven forbid you come up with something new or novel. Like the old guard that are editing the journals will just say, no, that's unorthodox, like you should go publish in Mad Magazine or something. And here in northeastern United States, like the archaeology is still, operating in a sort of 1960s paradigm. But in other parts of the world, they're really looking at how Stone Age people were able to have huge ecological impacts, and a lot of good. A lot of it, sure, they were implicated in some, the Pleistocene mass extinctions, but it wasn't like a simple overkill hypothesis. They were through a lot of like grassroots self-organizing activities. They were having like large impacts, and a lot of them were very good. Guy William Bailey did ecological plant inventories, and places that were occupied by humans even in the long past had a much greater degree of biodiversity than completely undisturbed pristine wildernesses that would be dominated by for example, one species of tree that can reproduce in low light but also dominate the canopy, so the very unproductive environments. And the neat thing about that too is, going back to unschooling, like if you look at the ethnohistoric literature with, say, the Iroquois, the kids were right in the mix with everything. They were out there with their moms. They were maternalistic and matrilocal. So the women were in charge, of a lot of the clan leadership, and they were also when people married, the husband would move in with the wife's family. And they were also completely in charge of the horticulture, which was vast. And, some of the early descriptions from like Champlain and Cartier, you'd have these villages that would have like 40 or 60 acres of, food production going on around them. And it was reportedly not a lot of hard work how they did it. And the kids were out there with them doing it, right there, learning right with their parents, not separated,
Yeah.
And there's throughout all of human history, I mean, our schooling system is only about 150 years old, and there are examples of schools and workshops and apprenticeships that go back into antiquity, but for the most part, kids learned organically just by being in society. And I think of it in terms of like the transmission of culture, which culture for non-anthropologists can be thought of as everything that helps humans to adapt to the environment that isn't biological or genetic, so like we wear clothes so we can live in the Arctic, but we're not physically adapted to that. And that's part of what our culture allows. There's no other example on the whole planet of any species at our height in the food ladder or food web that has covered more of the earth than humans. And it's because of our culture. Like a lot of times there's these sort of scientific just so stories about, starvation and going without. But, when you think about our species originated in, Eastern Africa or Western Africa or the Middle East about 150 to 200,000 years ago, based on fossil evidence, and has spread out over the entire planet. There's no, even things that seem really uninhabitable, like we are inhabiting and thriving in, like that all happened without any kind of formal control over the transmission of culture. And 150 years ago, somebody decided like this is really important. We need to control it, and you can hypothesize about their motivations, whether they were good or bad, But I think that it's really hurting us as a society that we are trying to control it and limiting people's experiences so much. I see it, like when you look at early frontier and post-frontier architecture and landscapes, you used to have these quote unquote gentleman farmers reading Homer and the Iliad, in their Italianate and Greek revival farmhouses. And, and they knew the importance of an education, and they bought into the system of schooling, but it's every generation, it seems to get a little worse and a little worse. And now you drive around the country and a lot of those, iconic farmhouses are crumbling in ruins, and there's like trailers next to them, and 6 kids lined up getting into the school bus, and it just kind of breaks my heart to see what we're losing, with this overreaching attempt to control the transmission of culture. It's like the kids are separated from the world and then taught about it through abstractions.
Yeah. No, that's so fascinating. I find that really interesting to hear you talk about. And I think that leads really nicely into the next question, because I think that's what you've been talking about, was the key pieces in your decision to leave your PhD program and stay home with your children instead. So was that those kinds of things, the things that were coming together for you and kind of informed your decision at that point?
Yeah, all of those things tied together, and and that was very much like the intellectual foundation. It's for me. I can't just have an authoritative figure tell me like this is best. I have to know the data behind it and the way the studies were conducted, and admittedly a lot of it I can't make sense of. It's outside of my field or experience, but like a lot of times when you know the pieces of what's behind these decisions, and they all kind of form like a logical construct that works with everything else, then it's like it makes a lot more sense. And that was a huge part of it, having this sort of like view of humanity, of the evolution of our cultures and formations of states and hierarchical societies, and it's like thinking about what worked and what didn't work really helped, but honestly, like the biggest single factor, like we were talking about before, was just, this deep-seated love for the kids. And I couldn't, work wasn't enough, school wasn't enough. The idea of becoming a professor at some Ivy League school, not that I ever would have if I stayed with it, but, like that wasn't enough to replace the kind of like sadness I would feel when I would leave the kids in the care of strangers, or, watch them go away on the school bus. And, like that was the big thing, that these kids are wonderful and they're loving and they're needing, and especially at those early ages, it seems like we have this thing, and it's like a sort of like a tempo thing that I think is really unhealthy. And it's like when kids are first born, they're the most needy, and we have all these institutional and cultural traditions where we're saying, you got to stop being so needy. You're going to cry yourself to sleep in the next room. You're going to go sit in that bouncy chair instead of bouncing on my knee. I got to get work done. You're going to go to daycare and then school. And then at the other end of that, like the juvenile adolescent period, we have the opposite thing where like you're 16 years old, sit down, raise your hand to speak. If you have to go to the bathroom, you'll need a hall pass, and we're, trying to keep them little. We make them grow too fast at the early stages, and then we restrict them too much at the later stages. And, an early piece of this for us was like we fell in love with the whole attachment parenting. And the way I think, like kids are like little containers or vessels, and or a human being is like a vessel or a container. And when they're little, they're so much easier to fill up when they're empty than when they're big and empty. It's so much harder to fill them up. So you feed into them all the love and support and nutrition, when they're so tiny. And then when they grow up, they still need that stuff, but they don't need as much because they're already pretty filled up. It kind of grows with them. And it seems like we as a society have institutionalized like the opposite of that practice. Yeah. And, like when you see kids that are, raised in more of a free range manner, or often even like I've met some of our neighbors in our new country home, and like their kids are just like rolling around in the grass and, taking steps and tumbling and, allowed to fall. And it's like, it's so much easier to learn how to fall when you're only a foot from the ground than when you're 3 feet, 4 feet from the ground, Yeah, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent.
Oh,
Got
that's
lost.
okay. Yeah,
But
no, I think that was such a great point, right? Because it's true at those two ends, we're kind of doing the opposite of what as human beings they seem to need, right? Need and want,
yeah,
want all that connection when they're younger, and we're trying to separate them as quick as possible. And then when they're older, all of a sudden we want to, keep them close and keep, control over them, and they're wanting to, spread their wings. So yeah, that's
yeah,
such
and when
a
they're
great point.
young, yeah, when they're young, they're like I forget the numbers, but like the rate of your brain's growth, just like the size of your head, it is growing so fast cognitively. Where our wiring is like shooting out in all kinds of crazy directions, and it's like, and that's the importance of like push and pull with other living creatures, recursively reorganizing with your environment. It's like it's stimulating this cognitive development, and we need to be fostering that and not restricting it. And then and when they are, I think kids that are allowed to do that, they're able to take on more responsibility sooner. And responsibility is a kind of a coded word, but like they're able to do things sooner than like kids that are deprived of those things. And the other thing that I wanted to mention earlier when I kind of stumbled over my own thoughts was I remember, I think it was in Don Taylor Gatto's article Against School, where he quotes, I want to say, a Princeton professor giving a speech, and this guy is bragging about how with their methods they've extended the juvenile period like 2 or 3 years. And when I read that, my jaw just dropped, because like I'd read a lot in the past about domestication, because like when humans spread out across the planet, they went to different areas and they developed different ways of adapting. And Europe is really peculiar because like nowhere else, have humans domesticated so many species. And domesticated is really the old term, but the real term is like co-evolved. They've like interwoven their lives with these animals so much. And so like that's a really interesting topic for archaeologists. And for one, it's because like a lot of diseases co-evolved with them, and that's what was really incredibly destructive when they started interacting with Native Americans, who, like all of North and South America, the only domesticated animal was, I think, the alpaca in South America. So they did what was more like wild managing game. So they had plentiful deer, squirrel, and turkey, but they were there because they grew so much food around their camps and villages that there was just plenty left over for all the animals. So if you needed a deer hide, you could just walk out your door and shoot a deer, and there's your meat and hide. And but in Europe, we had them living in our own houses even, or we lived in the barns with them. And so anyway, domestication was a real big focus for me in archaeology. But when I read that, my jaw dropped, because like when you domesticate a creature, the number one thing you select for is the retention of neonatal traits, because a baby lion is cute and cuddly and playful. A baby bear, a baby anything is sweet and easy. So when I hear that they're bragging about retaining the juvenile or extending the juvenile stage in human beings, I'm like, oh my God, it really gives you this sense of a nefarious. You want to domesticate people, keep them more docile and obedient,
Yeah.
That was, I don't know, to me that gave me the chills when I read that.
Yeah, well, and with the perspective that you had coming to it, the connections that you made there, that's really interesting. I was also curious. So now you've decided to stay home with your kids. I was wondering how now, because you said you hadn't heard of unschooling at first. So I was wondering how you went about building or ended up finding trust in the process of unschooling. I was curious about the pieces of that resonated with you and helped you feel more confident, like that you saw with your kids, and you helped grow your confidence in living an unschooling lifestyle.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, a lot of it just sort of was natural. Like, we chose to be completely honest with our kids. Like, one of the early rules that we came up with, or policies, or however you want to describe it, was like that we're not going to say no to the kids unless we have a very good reason. There's a lot of like things that, you just say no out of habit to kids. Like, can I climb that tree? No, you'll fall. Can I dig a hole? No, you'll get muddy. And it's like, well, we realize, well, that you kids can climb trees, and, Silas broke his arm, quote unquote, climbing a tree. But you know what? He didn't actually climb the tree. He fell off of a slide, a little plastic slide, and he just landed in the exact wrong way. And the little cap of his elbow came off, and they had to put a pin in it. But like, he wasn't even in the tree. He fell off of the slide. That could have happened on a chair or anything. Trees are I think even more safe because there's a lot more to grab onto. The branches are all around you, and even if you do slip, you can grab. And our kids are little monkeys, and I've never even seen them slip. We have a elm tree I planted in the backyard, and it has grown like crazy. It's only like 7 years old, but it's 30 feet tall. And the kids are all over that. I think a lot of it's because whenever we fill up the kiddie pool, I have them put it where the water will go to the tree when it splashes out or is emptied. And I suspect living by the expressway, there's a lot of carbon pollution, and that's like food for the tree. But everything we planted here has grown like crazy. So so a lot of it was just that trust and not having that habitual no, like that. So we started moving into it that way. And I hadn't heard of your podcast. The first one, I forget how I first heard of the term unschooling. But what was really formative was a podcast by Amy Childs, The Unschooling Life. And what's good with that one is there's just so many things that, it makes you question that you wouldn't normally question, like even like, well, you have a kitchen with all this food. Why not be a short order cook? Why should your kid have to eat something they really detest? Like we do have them try everything, but it's just got to be a spoonful. It's like, because sometimes you got to try something up to 20 times before you develop a taste for it. And I think just having them have a spoonful is not too much to ask, because like in the end, if they're an adult with a really diverse palate, I think they'll be grateful for that. But now, listening to your podcasts and, articles come up, Peter Gray is Psychology Today on Facebook. There's a lot about self-directed learning and letting kids assess risk for themselves, and especially if they get an early start at it, they get better at it. But, kind of the more you immerse yourself in these things, and listening to, like you interview other people who, have found their own paths to unschooling, the more you just make all these connections, and it's sort of like a logical, cosmological order where all these things they're not at odds with each other. They all agree with each other, and they all support each other, and they're also completely consistent with, studies on cognitive development that are published by, in hard science journals that, don't even know what unschooling is. It's like, it's not a conspiracy. It's just this logical reality. So, how can you not do it when you have all that evidence, all that support?
Yeah, I know. One thing I find so fascinating is, I'll be reading completely, unrelated topics, etc. But their research, their ideas, when somebody is truly deeply interested in their topic and they dig deep down, they find the same kind of roots that we find, like how people learn, how people develop, how capable people are, and you realize how universal or foundational to the way human beings live. You know what I mean? That unschooling hits. Everybody, if you dig deep enough from any perspective, when you get to the root of how humans are doing that thing, I find so often that they get to the same roots that I have found from the unschooling perspective, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the kids, they, an unfettered kid, like not tied down by a schedule or a curriculum or a class structure. They pick up a task they're interested in. They do a puzzle, they color, they read a little bit, like all kinds of things that you might think are classically educational materials or whatever. But then they get, they finish with, and they go run around, or they go take a nap, or they watch TV or something. And so there were these studies that were done that they had kids, they had like, test groups and control groups, and like they would have them study a specific task, and group A would study it, and then they would keep studying it until a certain time, and then they would have to be tested on it. Group B, they did one where they studied the task, and then the kids went and played for a half hour, the same amount of time that the others were still studying, and then they were tested on it. And believe it or not, they did a lot better on the test than the ones who studied the whole way through. And there was another one where they were like, instead of playing, they napped. And again, they did that. It's like, we don't realize it, but, we process and post-process all kinds of information, when we're sleeping, when we're playing, when we're just, living and being free. And, our schools have they found our standardized test scores are dropping, so let's double down on what's not working. And, and let's not, reintroduce recess, which is just completely missing from a lot of them. Or, our Buffalo public schools have been non-compliant for years with requirements for physical activity, and our scores are really bad too. And the thing is, it's not because of the teachers or the school or the curriculum. It's like because we have a city that's got it's incredibly segregated, and there's some really concentrated poverty. And, attempts to fix it through busing and things like that in the past really only made it worse. And every time the system gets ratcheted down the wrong road further, it can't get back for whatever reason. There's just too much bureaucratic machinery that won't bend or flex. So, yeah, sorry, I got off on a tangent again.
Oh, your tangents are fun, but I really appreciated the study that you shared there too about the importance of that free time, right? For things to just process and connect, instead of trying to keep pushing things in, because that is something through unschooling we talk about so often on the podcast, actually, that value of that free time, and space, if it is to nap or to hang out, to play, whatever, that isn't wasted or lost or lazy time. That time is so valuable for a person. Yeah. So I was wondering, what has been the most challenging aspect of moving to unschooling for you?
Well, initially, I felt really insecure about being a man who takes on traditionally in our society of late, female roles. And, I was raised, a redneck kid in Ohio. Singing and dancing was not something boys did. And, I still can't carry a tone like if I try to sing. And I feel personally robbed from that, but I still carry a lot of that baggage. And so initially, like walking into the grocery store with a kid in the grocery cart, kid in the snuggly, people looking at you because, I don't know, it seemed to me that when I started doing it, there weren't a lot of other dads around doing it. And I would see people look at me, and sometimes they'd have concerned looks on their face, and you feel like they're judging you. But I quickly realized a lot of those people were just like, they were actually trying to be supportive, and they would say things like, oh, you've got your hands full. It's like, oh boy, great job, and it's like when they start talking to you instead of just looking at you, you start realizing, wow, they actually think it's great. They admire it, and after a while, I find the older I get, the less I care about what other people think. And, you get more confidence in all your actions and stuff like that. So, that was an early challenge, worrying about stuff like that. The other challenges are, it's a little bit, if anything, it's almost like paranoia. Like I feel like something's going to go wrong and this will all be taken away from me. And, like we had a case in the local news where a woman had her kids taken by Child Protective Services for educational neglect. And she was like, I'm a homeschooler. I applied the paperwork and they're, this is wrong. And the CPS and the schools, they're on bound to not divulge anything about their clients, so all you got was that mom's perspective. And but later, eventually it comes out, like through investigative reporting that she only submitted, that there were several warnings, and she only submitted the homeschooling paperwork after CPS was involved, and she wasn't actually homeschooling. There was no history of her complying with any kind of standards, and she also just was somebody who came from a life with a lot of poverty and trauma and stress, and homeschooling it ended up just being a tool for her to try to get her kids back, but it gave homeschooling a bad spotlight for a little while in our local news, but it also just like hearing educational neglect and kids taken from you, because when Asa was in school, like I said, I was friends with his teachers, and they're really great people. I haven't met many teachers I don't like. I think ironically they're the sort of compassion-based grease that keeps the awful machine running, because they're there making lives in this institution more tolerable for the kids most of the time, sometimes worse. Mm-hmm. But like we played hooky kind of a lot, and Asa's teacher thought it was great, because she knew we were going to the science museum, we were going hiking at Hunter's Creek, or camping in Allegheny, and and all these wonderful things, and or even to the beach. Gosh, there's so much to learn and absorb there, whether it's geomorphology or biology or whatever you want to look at, whatever piques your interest. But so while she thought that was great, like these administrators, they just see, the absences pile up, unexcused absences. And we actually got a letter saying, you've missed, I think it was like 16 days this year. If you miss any more, we might start a CPS investigation. Variables there, like why are they missing school? Like ours were missing school for the science museum, and being with their family in healthy, supportive environment. They were missing it because not any of the awful reasons you might think, but anyway, like that letter was like I don't know, it was like getting hit on the head with a cartoon hammer. Like it was when I really realized that the state has this like sort of legal control over my kids, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like that was scary. The idea that they would take him away and put him in like foster care or something because of something like absences, and to me that was kind of a pivotal moment for wanting to reduce their control or influence on our family, on our autonomy. Because it just was really, really unsettling.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. Last question. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks. As an unschooling dad, what piece of advice would you like to share with dads who are considering or are just starting out on this journey?
That's kind of hard. Because everybody, like you talk with somebody and they kind of they stimulate questions, and everybody's got their own thing. One of my neighbors said he saw me crossing that awful expressway with the 4 kids. And he and his wife want to have kids soon, and they like the idea of homeschooling, but they're scared by it. And he said he saw me like communicating with all the kids, making eye contact with the drivers, hands, gestures, talking, keeping them safe, keeping them, on the crosswalk and waiting, for the signals and stuff. And he said he just couldn't imagine ever doing that, and he said that was like just seeing that, what he described as like expert parenting in that setting, like that he just felt like he could never do that. And what I told him was, it's like, yes, you can. I mean, you don't say I'm going to take up painting and then expect to instantly become a master. You start with small moves. There's so many steps in between, that and where I was, like when you're, first learning how to change diapers and, how to deal with gas problems with the kid. It's like there's a million things that come before any complicated thing like, camping or crossing an expressway or outings, it's like, and it all builds on itself. And
you have one kid first too, right? Not 4.
Yeah, just one. And those are actually, I think, the hardest times, when the one kid only has you to stimulate them, when they start having siblings, it gets a lot easier. But our first outings, we have this great gigantic cemetery here in Buffalo, and I was really insecure about going out in public without Renee's help, when I was home with kids, and it was all just a series of small moves. So our first outing was to that cemetery, and a lot of it was because like it's a green natural space, it's quiet, and there wouldn't be a lot of people there judging me because like when you're beginning out, not everybody, but I always felt like people were like judging me, like whether it's because I'm a man being a caregiver, it's like, oh, you loser, you couldn't find a job, or, or some sort of sexist derogatory comments, but which honestly, I've never actually come across that. That was all in my head. But those first outings at Forest Lawn Cemetery were so, I don't know, it's kind of like a place when I go there now, it makes me feel nostalgic. I still remember the parts of the cemetery we hung out in, and the very first time, like they were out, they just like Josie, I think, was in a snuggly Asa, hit the ground running in one direction. Silas hit the ground running in the opposite direction, and I'm like running around trying to corral them, and they're disappearing behind these massive headstones. And but gradually we got our groove on, and we would talk about lessons we learned and how, like if we're going to have these adventures, we have to stay at least where we can see each other, and you build on it. It slowly builds up, and I guess the other piece of advice would, you really have to just start trusting yourself and your kids. There's this sort of underlying ethos in our culture and like all of Western culture that we have this like sort of Freudian id that's this horrible monster just chasing after like the most primal urges and needs, and it's like that's crazy. It's like if you start thinking of like our primal urges and needs being, that we need to be around other people, that we need compassion, that we need to be able to give and communicate. And you start thinking of those as the things that are the base needs, and you start seeing them more in the kids and yourself, and you start trusting them and what they want. And you don't feel like you're a prison guard, you feel like you're a learning facilitator. And, so it's great. It's like you keep your eyes on that long-term prize. Like I imagine, our kids when they're in their 20s or 30s, like your kids, and, maybe coming to a family reunion where they're excited to show up, or just hanging out because they want to be by each other. It's not some begrudging obligation, but it's like that. that sort of long-term and those sorts of long-term rewards, because they don't just end there, and they don't just begin there, those are kind of like the things that keep you, going through the hard times when you're tired and, there's 4 kids all wanting a different sandwich or something else, and you just want a nap.
Yeah, no, right.
So you just gotta, I don't know, keep an upbeat perspective, a long-term perspective and a short-term perspective, and trust that your kids they're curious. The world's inherently interesting and they're inherently curious. And as long as you keep them in the world and take their questions seriously and sure that their interactions with each other and other people are, healthy and supportive, and they're going to turn out okay. One of the other tricks I learned a long time ago, but I only learned how to employ it more recently, was like when I was in elementary school, there was this kid, and he was, I don't know why, but he was just my arch enemy. He would always start fights with me, and like physical fights, verbal fights, and the weird thing was I usually won. I was a little bit bigger than him, and I had no idea why he was doing it, but I hated it, and it filled me with a sense of dread just having an enemy. You want people to like you normally. Mm-hmm. And one day I sat down and thought, it's like, geez, what would it be like to be him, to have his family, to have his friends, to live in his house, to wear his clothes, and have me as an enemy? And I realized, oh my gosh, it would be much worse. He was one of the kids where I was in life doing a lot better, and it's like it took away my dread of that kid completely. And what I found recently is you can apply it to all kinds of fears. Like with Asa, when he was learning to read, we started out with a typical schooling or homeschooling approach where we would, kind of coerce him to read. And so, we have this tradition, we call it movie nap time. It started when Josie still needed naps, but Silas and Asa were too rambunctious to let them get them. So I would quiet them down with a midday movie, which, also gets them out of the sun, when it's at the sunburn full peak potential. But, so with Asa, we were saying, well, okay, before movie nap time can start, you have to read us one book, to be like Frank was a monster who wanted to dance, or Cat in the Hat type stuff. Not real challenging. We just wanted him to work on sight words and things like that. And so it went good for a while, but after a bit, it started to, he began to become resentful, and he felt that he was bored with the books. He had read a lot, and we didn't have any others, even though we have 1,000 kids' books. We always go to the library sales. So he fought it, and he became more and more resentful, and he finally was like, well, I don't care if I don't watch TV ever again. I'm not reading a book. And, we're like, okay, we're building a block here. We're going to make him hate reading, and I think that was maybe before we even discovered unschooling, as a thing. But we just said, we're gonna do it. We're gonna back off completely. It's like, okay, so you don't ever have to read another book again if you don't want to. And things went on, and a few months had passed, and I said, hey, Asa, would you mind reading me a book? And then I said, no, I guess so. And I couldn't get over it. His reading improved a whole lot in those 2 or 3 months when he hadn't been reading at all, due to our coercion. Mm-hmm. And the other sort of story was Silas, the next oldest. He, we were like, okay, whenever he wanted to read or work on numbers, or we always have like worksheets with tracing numbers available. You can print them from the internet for free. And I highly recommend a laser printer because it's so much cheaper. Those inkjets won't suck you dry. But,
yeah.
He would complain that he was never going to learn to read because most of our friends are schooled. Our friends are, we don't not hang out with people because they don't homeschool, and like a lot of their friends are just people they met at soccer or friends of our kids' friends, and Silas was, or kids of our friends. Silas was really becoming anxious because he wasn't learning to read, and kids his age were reading really well. And so he would he's a passionate person. He's very sensitive. So, and what helped me understand that is like when he's screaming, it's because he's reflecting what he feels. As somebody sensitive, he feels it intensely. So he responds intensely. Mm-hmm. So once you figure that, you can handle it more and be more, empathetic and understanding. But he was yelling at me one day about how he'll never learn how to read. And I said, well, if you want to sit down and learn to read, we can do it. If it's not the right time for you, it'll be hard, but you can do it. All these other kids do it. And so we sat down with very simple books and start pointing to the letters, sounding them out, making the words, and he's just oh, forget this. This is stupid. I don't care if I never learn to read. I don't want to do this. And he stomped off. And I just, by going back to that first story, I said, look around you, there's signs everywhere, books everywhere. The written word is everywhere. Now imagine the opposite of your fear. What if you wanted to keep these kids illiterate? What if you didn't want them to learn? How on earth would that ever happen? They're natural sponges. There's words everywhere. And, so the one day we went hiking at Hunter's Creek, which is a really great place nearby, and we took a not usual path home because I saw on the map there was a different access point to the park, and I wanted to find it so we could explore that the next time. And we're sitting at this stop sign to get on 20A, which is a busy road, and we're kind of stuck there waiting for traffic a little bit. And Silas said, Dad? And I said, what name of the first letter in Beaver Meadows? And I was just thinking, Beaver Meadows, we've only been there once, and it was a long time ago. Why would he bring that up? And I turn over my shoulder and I say, Silas, why would you ask that right now? And right outside the window is a sign for Beaver Meadows with saying X miles down this road. It's he was kind of in a Gestalt way learning to read. And now with no formal instruction at all, he reads to his little sister and his little brother, and it's just getting better, and they actually enjoy it. There's not those blocks that that old I hate you more than books mentality. But
wow, those are great stories, Dan. Thanks for sharing those. Those are the pieces. They're all the interesting ways that we as the parents, right? How we learn these things about how our kids can be in the world, right? They show us how capable they are and how they pick up and learn just so much just by being on their own, being free of coercion, right? That seems to be a huge piece, isn't it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
When you got rid of that piece, then all of a sudden they're free to follow their own instincts.
Yeah, and they do sometimes do things that have to be, I don't know, restricted or reduced, but it's you don't have to just say, don't do that, we talk about some of it. When Silas was really little, there was a guy who, he was sick, basically. His body had a lot of extra pounds, and there was something going on with his metabolism. And Silas was 2, he didn't know, he's Dad, why is that guy's belly so big? And, I was just hush, 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 and he didn't see anything. It's but he kept repeating it. And finally, I just kind of I didn't know if the guy had heard or not, but I didn't want his feelings to be hurt. So, I just kind of picked Silas up and we all went out and just talked about, how that can hurt somebody's feelings to talk about them, especially right, where they can hear you. And that having a big belly is generally thought of as undesirable in our society. And And it's like once he knew, even at, like the age of 2, like once he knew that would hurt that guy's feelings to talk about that or anything, like the kids really quickly, picked up on, well, if they have like honest questions about somebody, why are they doing that? Why are they acting that way? Why do they look that way? That, you don't do it in a way that'll hurt their feelings, and then, so you don't have to, punish them, to get those points across. It's like you give, reasons behind it, and they, when they understand the reasons, they apply them really judiciously in their real world activities.
Exactly, because they want to engage with the real world, and they don't want to be mean. They don't want to hurt other people's feelings. That's not something that they want to do. They want to engage and connect with people nicely, right? I mean, that's and they just want that information, right? So I don't think of that as a restriction or anything. Like you were talking earlier from an archaeological point of view, it's the transmission of culture, right? So you're giving them more information about their society, about their culture, and they could not take it or whatever, but as you've seen and as so many of us have seen, that's what they want. They want to connect well with their culture. They want to live with people, not against. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Like the Taoism gives the analogy of the way is like a river, and like you can swim, perpendicular to the flow. You can swim upstream and get really tired, or you can swim with the water and it's empowering and you go really fast. And culture is just like that. If you work with the culture, it's empowering, it's enabling. Even there's aspects of our culture that are really dysfunctional right now, but still, if you learn it and how to work with it, you can do a lot with it. And even our public schools are actually starting these community schools, which are actually really great. They're becoming resources for the whole community, especially evenings and weekends, and ways for grandparents to teach knitting classes. And it's just in its infancy, but it's got a lot of potential. But yeah, like understanding and learning and working within the culture is like. It can be very artful and empowering. It's like even wind, like the sailing analogy. It's like you can sail into the wind. You just got to know how to tack. And then all of a sudden, the wind that could be just blowing you away from your goals is all of a sudden pushing you towards your goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Because when we talk about culture too, we're talking about, or at least, the way I see it, it's at the human level, at the connection level, person to person, versus, the more institutionalized, systematized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The difference, like when we're actually out in the world and connecting with people and talking to them, and we want to, engage and get along. I think I was just wanting to make that distinction just in case, but they really seem to want to engage with the world as their parents, as their family, as a real person. I always say that kids are real people. You know what I mean? They're not. Yeah, children are capable. They're real people. They can engage. You don't have to put like an artificial filter over top of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what I tell the kids, and how I think about it, is like, in terms of kids being people and deserving respect, is, as I look at that, old person over there, there's a little kid inside them, and they're like, "What do you mean?" And said, "Well, that person was a little kid, right? Like a baby, newborn, and then a 5-year-old, and so on." And it's like, all those experiences are part of who that person is, and inside you is a little old man or woman. And it's like, what do you mean? They're saying, well, all these experiences are going to be a part of who you are. And, if kids are taught at an early age that they don't matter, they're going to grow up, with the sense that they or other people or kids don't matter. And they'll never learn how to respect other people if they're not respected themselves.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Dan. Well, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I was a little nervous, but I think it went okay. So
yeah, no, that was awesome. And before we go, where is the best place for people to connect with you online?
Well, my email address is teamcadzow, CADOW, at probably the best. We named our on-school, we named it the Team Cadzow Research Station, kind of in honor of Team Zissou from The Life Aquatic. Big fan of Wes Anderson movies.
Oh, cool. That's been on my list for a long time. I must get to it.
Yeah. And our on-school bus is named the Belafonte, which is his research vessel's name. Just for fun. We don't take it too seriously.
Yeah, but fun, exactly.
Yeah. And we made up T-shirts too. We did the Team Cadzow Research Station, and then the other one is the Team Cadzow Initiative, which is kind of playing off Lost, the TV show we got into for a little while. But I think that's fun too. You can make your own school uniforms, build in a sense of esprit de corps.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks very much, Dan. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Pam.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. You might also like the backlist episodes at livingjoyfully.ca/podcast. While you're there, be sure to pick up your free copy of my book, What is Unschooling? In it, we'll explore some of the common questions people have when they first hear about unschooling, like how will my child learn? How do I know they're learning? What is deschooling? And how do I get started? It's also available at many online ebook retailers. And if you'd like to connect online, you can find me on Facebook at Living Joyfully. Until next time, have fun living and learning with your family.